welcome to the Wisdom Speakers and Seekers podcast. My name is Jennifer Regular, and I am a soul-centered empowerment coach at Lighting the Path, and also your host here for the show. Today, I have Shawn Doucet. He's currently living in Victoria, BC, and he has come across Vardankar. It's an out-of-body travel to God realization. And so he's here today to really talk about that, and talking about it from his perspectives as a soul traveler who works as a Vahana, sharing the message of Vardankar. And the topic today is really about returning to God via soul or Tuza travel. So all about soul travel today and connecting and returning to God through this. How did you come across Shawn? First of all, I want to welcome you here.
Thank you.
So thank you so much for joining us here.
Thank you
And
for
I'm
having
wondering,
me.
what even brought you to this point in your life?
Well, that's a long story. What led me onto the spiritual path in general was a long process of, I guess, questions that I had about life. I didn't know anything. I went through some dark periods, and not to dwell on that too much here, but I made a vow to myself that I would, do what it took to figure out what my life was all about. And that took me through a series of experiences and learning, different learning experiences. It took me about, I don't know, maybe less than 10 years or so, but eventually I would find Vardankar. But I was on a different path before then, which was also a light and sound path, but they didn't really talk about soul travel. So this was very different. Anyway, it's a very long story. I don't think I could really squeeze that whole story in here, but
You did give us a good understanding of kind of just the path that it took in discovering this. And what was the message about Vardankar that really appealed to you, that resonated with you and awakened you that this was going to be the path that you followed?
Well, the path that I was on before then, in contrast, was a lot more psychic in nature. And I had questions like, I would often ask myself, what is the difference between psychic and spiritual? And there were certain questions that I had which wasn't being satisfactorily answered on the other path. But not only that, the other path didn't claim to bring soul all the way back to the heart of God. And so it was sort of like, I was on this path that wasn't really what I wanted. I wanted the highest path. And, eventually Vardankar would have just manifest into my life. I was actually thinking I would have to go to India or somewhere far away in order to find like the highest guru. Like I was really determined to find it, and whatever that was. And well, I kind of had an idea of what that would be. I wanted a master that could actually bring you to the highest level, to the highest degree of fulfillment. And so I was surprised when I found a master living in the West. I was like, oh, this is very strange. And it was Alan Feldman, who was a living Vardan master, who is translated now. But that was very surprising. And I didn't jump on board right away, but it was definitely in the back of my mind for several years before I ended up actually joining. So I hope that gives some description.
It sure does. It sure does. And so you felt that this was a true master. This was someone who is able to guide you and bring you into that realization of fulfillment that you so desired.
Right. Yes. And it's important to know that in Vardankar, in order for there's a saying that a child can't get nourishment from a dead mother. And so in order for soul to be hooked up to these higher levels, we need a Vardan master in the physical. And so, Alan Feldman has translated now. So actually the inner Magatma is Phoebe Quantz, and the outer intermaster is Heather Jamboy. So it's slightly different, but the path is very ancient. It's gone through many different changes on the outer, but on the inner, it's always been the ancient science of soul or Tuza travel. And, there's a lot to say about that too. Milarepa, many people have heard of Milarepa. Well, he practiced Vardankar. It wasn't called Vardankar at that time because Vardankar has been hidden behind the garb of religions and culture, and it's kind of been hidden away from the public eye for various reasons. One is that only the worthy would find the master, and the other is that there's been persecution. So in times of ancient Greece, like there was Plato, Pythagoras, and others. But Plato and Pythagoras, many people know about them, but they didn't know that in the inner circle they taught Vardankar, and so they had an outer circle, which was like the teachings were kind of hidden behind that outer garb of philosophy or music and science or whatever it was.
Right.
Yeah. So
very interesting to realize that how that was hidden behind
yes.
all of that.
Yeah.
And so you did mention about soul travel and Tuza. So tell us more about that.
Sure. Well, soul travel is different from astral travel, which is really important to know. I mean, astral travel can be dangerous. Soul travel, you're traveling in the soul body. So soul has no limitations. So soul can be anywhere. Soul can be in more than one place at the same time. There's no limitation to soul. So soul can go to the astral plane or the causal plane or the mental plane, or it can go to these higher planes beyond the worlds of matter, energy, space, and time, like the soul plane on up. And so the goals of Vardankar, which is self-realization on the soul plane and God realization on the Anami Lock or 10th plane and above, these are the goals of Vardankar, and also to become a conscious co-worker with the Hue Ray or the Mrigatma. If you're starting out, it would be with the Mrigatma. But eventually it's to, reach the same level as the Vardan masters, which is, the planes of God realization. And so I hope I answered that question.
Yes, absolutely. And so, as you mentioned, there's these different levels. So there's an evolution, a mastery, would you say, that you go through?
Yeah, I should say more about the path of Vardankar. The first 2 years of study in Vardankar, one is trying out the path so they can decide whether they want the full initiation or not. And so the first 2 years of study are like a probationary period where one can freely leave without any problems. But once one has been fully initiated, so the second initiation on up, those require a greater degree of commitment. And so there are initiations. The first initiation you can ask for, but the rest come when one is simply ready. And what else to say? I forgot what the question was. I'm sorry.
You're just talking about the evolution or the mastery of the different levels. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. So one will reach, they say it takes about 15 to 35 years to reach the God realization or Vardan mastership. So it's a fully committed path.
Yes, and it sounds like you're in it wholeheartedly too.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, exactly where you're meant to be, doing what you need to be doing, it sounds like.
Right, exactly.
And so how has this impacted your life, Shawn? How is your life different now?
I think, well, that's a hard one to answer because, I mean, there is something called the law of silence, which means like, we have experiences, but we shouldn't like share too much of our experiences. So the main thing is sharing the message of Vardankar. But I mean, of course, it's changed my life because it's changed my vision of what life is and what life can be. And so, soul exists in eternity. And so stepping onto the path of Vardankar is like stepping into a whole new, it changes every future lifetime, so it really is a big, it's difficult to explain, but it's a big deal because it's, I don't know how to put it into words, but it's like every step along the way you make in Vardankar changes your future lifetimes. And even though it seems subtle, subtle things can be very powerful. Something that I've learned recently, for various reasons, but at various times. But, just because something is subtle, eventually it won't be subtle, but in the beginning it seems very subtle. But it's like just because it's subtle, that's like the essence of life. It's like there was a good analogy that somebody gave, Heather G gave, which was that when you eat food, like when you go without food, you can go maybe a month. Some people can go like a month without food. And without water, it's considerably less time, like maybe a few days or a bit longer. And without air, it's obviously a lot less long without air. It's like, a few minutes. And so spirit is even more essential to the being, and yet it's the most subtle. It's like food, water, air, and spirit. And so each one is more important than the other, even though it's more and more subtle. And so.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And so you mentioned about changing future lives and changing those timelines. What about going backwards? There's a lot of people that would refer to karma and the past. So what's Vardankar's messages about that?
Oh, that's a pretty good question. Yeah, karma and reincarnation is a very important aspect of Vardankar. We definitely recognize karma and reincarnation. In fact, one of the reasons that soul would want to get off the wheel of reincarnation is because it's aware of it. And so, people who find Vardankar usually have some awareness that there's past lives. And for people who have no belief in that, it's usually not the path for them. But when one has some awareness of past lives, Vardankar helped. Well, I should say the Vardan master, the living Vardan master, takes over the Chila's karmic account and just leaves that karma which it needs in order to live it the life that you're living now. But we work off that karma. We work off thousands of years of karma in a very short time. So even though it's the direct path back to Hure or God, but it's also the most difficult path for that reason, is that because we're dealing with all this past karma, and it can be very confusing, and many people leave the path because of that. And but if one holds to the principles and realizes that that's what's happening, is that I'm working off this karma, then it's a matter of not giving up and having the desire to reach God or Hure. And yeah, it's a combination of desire and not giving up. So
yeah, having that desire, the perseverance, not giving up, and also another benefit of having a master, right? A Vardankar or Vahana master. Yeah. So what is the role of a Vahana? You called yourself a Vahana. Can you share a little bit more about that?
Sure. Vahana is just a word. There's a book called the Shariaki Hure. It's actually, these books exist on the outer and the inner, but the Shariaki Hure on the inner is found in the Golden Wisdom temples. And so every plane, like from the physical on up, has a Golden Wisdom temple. So the physical world that we're in has maybe a few Golden Wisdom temples, as well as one on Venus. And there's temple guardians that are Varda masters. And in these temples are the golden books of wisdom, which is also called the Shariaki Hure. And so you can read these books on the inner or the outer, and Varda masters have transcribed them occasionally on the outer. So we have 2 volumes currently. And in those volumes, it talks about the different margs or roles of service. So there's the Bhakti marg, there's the Jnani marg, and there's the Vahana and Arahata. I think I said that. Hopefully I said that right. And the Vahana one is simply the one who's sharing the message. And Arahata is a teacher. Vahana is one who's kind of like a missionary. They just share the message of Vardankar. And the Jnani marg is the order of wisdom, where you're, doing different forms of art or writing, sharing wisdom of the path. And the other one was, I think, Bhakti marg, which is the order of love. So like giving love to the needy and stuff like that. And so one can do various roles. It doesn't have to be just one, but these are the kind of the orders of service that one can serve the Vardan and the Hure and Mrigatma.
Right. Okay. Thank you for that. And so as your role of a Vahana and being a missionary and sharing the message of Vardankar, obviously we're here on the podcast today. What are the other ways that you're sharing that message? Is there, how does that look basically?
Well, for me, currently sometimes I do YouTube videos for Vardankar, which, may or may not be a Vahana thing. Other things I might do is I do an expo. So I'll have a table at an expo, with all the information and, handing out flyers and things like that. And, um, at the moment, that's kind of the extent of it. But though, expos, I recently did one and it was quite enjoyable. And some people really seem interested in it, almost like, they're discovering something. Like, there's this one lady that came up to my table. I had the pictures of the Vard masters spread out on my table, and she just started pointing at them. She was like, "I know that guy. I know that guy. I know that guy." And I thought that was quite amusing. And she was telling how she had astral out of body experiences during the night, kind of involuntarily. And I thought maybe, it's possible, souls are brought to these golden wisdom temples in the night to study study the Sharyaki Hure, or studying these temples. Sometimes before they find the path on the outer, they'll find it on the inner, because this path is very ancient, and it just is. And these Varden masters, there's a few of them on Earth, and they're on all the different planes. So, did I answer that question?
Yes, amazing. And I appreciate the example too of just what kind of interest people take, like what kind of questions that come, or what kind of realizations happen in conversation with you.
Yeah, it's interesting. Some people are very, very intrigued, like, they're discovering something, and I know what that's like. And even though it's very subtle, something stands out to them, and something reaches out, and it happens. A lot of people have very different experiences. Some people will discover the master in their dreams before they find him on the outer, and so I think it's very fascinating, in that sense. Yeah.
Say when the student is ready, the teacher appears.
Yeah, that's right. Very true.
So, Shawn, what is the main message? Obviously, there's a lot involved in Vardankar and what can be shared. But if you were to share even just one key thing for people to take away from this today, what would it be?
I guess the whole heart of the path is becoming a vehicle of the Varden, and it's like our divine birthright, like our true heritage, in a sense that, like, as soul, we're a spark of the Hure. Like, we come from the ocean of love and mercy, and we come down into these lower worlds as a seed, and we get purified over the ages on this wheel of reincarnation. And once opportunity knocks, it may not knock again for a very long time. History has shown that it's kind of a rare opportunity to find Vardankar, and it's just a unique opportunity right now that it exists on the outer in the way that it does, because it usually doesn't. It was brought onto the outer in the late 60s by Paul Twitchell, and it was called Eckankar at that time. That was the high path when Paul Twitchell was around. And so it's just a rare opportunity. And there's a lot. It's almost like couldn't be put into words, but the fact that we are this spark of the Hure, and we have this opportunity to reclaim our divine heritage and understand why we exist in these lower worlds. Like, what is the true purpose, and what can we do to make the most fulfillment spiritually, in our lives, in this life and in the next lifetime? Because if we don't find God now, what are the chances we'll find it when we die? We really don't know. But the whole point of Vardankar is knowing, we die daily, and we have these experiences so that we can know where it is we're going and establish ourselves in the higher consciousness, higher planes. And so we gain control of our incarnations and our spiritual destiny throughout eternity, which is very exciting.
It is very exciting, and it's a continuation in the stream of life.
Yes, yeah.
So did Eckankar evolve into Vardankar then, or are they separate?
They are separate. Yes, they are two different entities. Yeah, but at the time when Paul Twitchell was around, he was a Vardan master. He called it something else at the time, but because of copyright laws and all that sort of thing, of course we have to use different words and stuff, so we can't call it Eckankar. So that's a different entity than Vardankar. Yeah.
Okay, and what differentiates them? How are they different?
Well, the main reason is simply having a true living Vardan master at the head of the path. So in Vardankar, we look to Phoebe Quants on the inner, and Heather Jamboy is the interim master on the outer. So she still writes books and does discourses and gives teachings. And so she's the one that we can look to on the outer for guidance. And Phoebe Quants we look to on the inner for guidance. And so the masters sometimes change over time, but the name of the path may or may not change. It all depends on what happens on the outer. Because when Paul Twitchell died, the leaders of that group became people who weren't actually Vardan masters. So, and that's kind of a controversial subject, which we don't have to get into too deeply. But hopefully I answered that to some degree.
Okay. Yeah, so the difference being having a master?
Yeah, a true Vardan master, living Vardan master. And this is something that somebody has to go on the inner, because just telling somebody, this is a real Vardan master, that's not enough. It really depends on what one gets on the inner. So if one can go within and see who the true living Vardan master is, that's the most essential thing in Vardankar. We don't just have to be told who it is. I mean, we go within and we have our own experiences and we gain truth for ourselves. That's really important in Vardankar.
That does sound very important, to be able to go into the inner and to experience that.
Yeah.
And so if people wanted to discover more and maybe do a little research or look it up or find out more about this or get in touch with you, Shawn, how can they do that?
Well, I'm just a Vahana, not a Vardan master. So, I mean, if people want to get in touch with possible membership or learning more about it, well, I recommend, going on Amazon and maybe buying a Vardankar book, or, you can log into vardankar.com and look at the membership services, and you can try the path out for 2 years. Although I personally recommend reading some of the materials before doing that. Reading a book or two before doing that is a good idea. But if you do become a member, you get discourses once every month. You get a discourse and a wisdom note every month. So there are membership services. And but your question was how to get in touch. Yes, there is. If you log on to vardankar.com, you can find an email there. And you can also look on YouTube. If you type in Vardankar, you'll find the Out of Body Soul Travel to God Realization link, and you'll be able to see a lot of videos there. So hopefully that gives some direction where to look.
Yes, perfect. And I'll have those links in the show notes too, so that people can just click in there and be able to access that.
Great.
It's been wonderful, Shawn, to be able to hear all about this today, about Tuza and soul travel and being a Vahana and how you found this path in the first place, and understanding the inner and outer worlds and the subtleties that exist and can be experienced, and how we continue to evolve with that, and how much it can impact our life, across all timelines.
Yeah, very true. Yeah, it was great. Thank you so much for having me. It was a joy to share this.
You're very welcome. And is there anything else before we check out here that you'd like to share?
I don't know if I mentioned spiritual exercises. That's just another component, or the light and sound. I said a little bit about it. I just want to mention that just to give a more full information, the light and sound is the audible life stream, or the Vardan, which descends from the ocean of love and mercy, and it creates all the lower worlds, and then it bounces back and there's an ascending wave. And so the living Vardan master connects soul to this ascending wave of the light and sound, and soul rides that back. And we do this by doing spiritual exercises at least 30 minutes every day. And I just wanted to say that because it's so important. Is there anything else? There's a God worlds chart as well, which is really important. That shows the different planes and the different sounds that one might hear on the different planes. So other than that, I think I said all I wanted to say. And thank you so much again for having me. It's great.
Absolutely. It's my pleasure. And thank you for sharing that additional information as well. And you mentioned the God chart. Is that something people can find also on the
Yeah.
website?
Yeah, that's on the website too. Absolutely. And there's also pictures of all the Bard masters. I think you can find that through the website too. Yeah.
Okay. Okay, great.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Shawn. I really appreciate what you're able to share and bring to light for us today.
Hmm.
And I want to also thank each and every one of you who've been listening here today. So appreciate your presence and your time and being able to share this as well. So continue to follow us on the Wisdom Speakers and Seekers podcast, and we'll see you again next week. I'm Jennifer Regular. Thanks again.